Welcome to Nugget 99 with Steve Grohman. Today we're going to talk about a crazy beast who finally gets some relatives.
Nice. We're happy for him. We're going to talk about this unusual animal that was found in the fossil record. Whether a creationist or whether an evolutionist, it doesn't matter the perspective somebody is coming from. All we have is the fossil record. Both sides have the fossils. It's the interpretation of them. It's the worldview that, and I've said this for years with our meetings, it's the worldview that you're actually looking at. And I think this might be a very good example of that. Because in the original creation, the fountains of the great deep hadn't broken up. The windows of heaven have not opened. So therefore that water's not here. We cover all this kind of thing in several lessons of our series, actually. If there's less water on this earth, that means you have smaller oceans. The Bible calls them seas. If there are smaller water masses, then there are more land masses. So therefore creatures could live wherever they wanted to. And then at the time of the flood, they would be where they were buried, and some would be found as fossils. It wouldn't surprise us that the same kinds of creatures could be found on different continents, what they call them now. Does that make sense the way I said that?
I think so.
Yeah.
In other words, because everything could freely roam in a greater land area, after the flood, they would have been cut off and maybe not be able to return to the greater landmass because the seas would be much larger.
Correct. Yes, just like with people. God dispersed everybody, scattered them abroad, confused the language, confounded the language. At that time is when the ice that came in at the time of the flood was melting back, and so even those land bridges for people were cut off.
Well, this article on this crazy beast comes from Science News, July 18th, 2020.
The ancient mammal Adelatherium hui is so weird that it eluded classification for nearly 2 decades.
A skeleton of the species roughly 70 million years old and uncovered in Madagascar in 1999 was clearly a mammal, but the skeleton boasted several distinctly unmammalian features such as a large hole on top of its snout. Also, although the animal's forelimbs were aligned with the spine like a typical mammal, the back legs were splayed out to the sides like a reptile.
You know, there are a couple of things here. It says it boasted several distinctly unmammalian features. A hole on top of the snout, we have porpoise has that. Not to saying this is a porpoise or related to a porpoise, but I'm just saying.
That is an example of an animal that a hole on top of its snout.
A hole on top of its snout, yes, essentially. It talks about the back legs were splayed out like a reptile. And what's interesting is they don't say this is a transitional fossil of any kind. They just say it's an unusual mammal. And we've been talking like that for years, saying that kind of thing, because just because an animal has an unusual feature, it doesn't mean it used to be something else.
Like a platypus, for example.
Yes,
they
that's
don't
a good
use that.
example.
And I think it's funny that they actually pick and choose what ones they do want to be used as transitional fossils. And it says that this crazy beast has identified as a Gondwanatherium, which was from supposed Gondwanaland, which was the supercontinent that is part of the Pangea scenario.
Yes,
but we know
prior
it's just,
to Jurassic time frame.
Right, and we just know that this is just pre-flood landforms, and then after the flood, again, as we just mentioned, as the seas became larger, the land masses became smaller overall.
Yes, the land was never, the continents that we have today were never one big landmass somewhere. There's no evidence for that at all, and we covered that on some of our series too. But it was just simply at a time when there was less water, so therefore more land is showing. But they were still in the same basic places that they are today.
Well, I think it was in 2014 that they found an intact skull from one of these, and then this sort of helped them find their relatives, even though they say that they found some in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. And that's what we're trying to explain is that
that's the reason.
It wasn't Gondwanaland. It was just before
But that's the reason
flood.
They say it was there.
Or actually it'd be post-flood too, when the waters would change the shape of the continents as the seas rose.
But they probably died at the time of the flood. I mean, there's a good chance they died at the time of the flood.
And this illustration they say it's a mysterious house cat-sized mammal, as illustrated, and it has been identified as a new species of Gondwanatherium, a member of an enigmatic group that lived during the age of the dinosaurs. I guess that just would make it more exciting, wouldn't it?
Certainly would make it more exciting.
And it looks like a kind of a weird skunk, the way they have it here. But again, we also want to point out that it is an illustration. It is an artist's rendition of filling out a few bones that they find, like a skull. And we don't have any idea what this animal looks like.
Absolutely not. This is all, the skeleton was found, but it's man that fleshes it out. And so therefore, that's what they believe it to look like. But again, the purpose of this short nugget was just because they say they find something and they say that it proves something. We always have to look at it as a especially if it has to do with landmass or it has to do with animals. We have to look at it from a pre-flood, through the flood, post-flood type of scenario. And just about everything, well, not just about, everything that they will ever come up with can be explained through that either pre-flood, through the flood, or post-flood.
Well, of course, because that's the truth.
Because that's the truth.
All right. Well, thank you.